Welcome to One Word Stories. My name is Joanna Sell, and I'm so happy to host a very special guest of mine, Kelvy Bird. Kelvy holds a BA in art history, and she is also a wonderful artist with the diploma from the Cornell University. She has got lots of ideas how to support social change transformation processes with art, and particularly with scribing, and also going beyond the visual technique with the generative scribing. A very warm welcome. I'm so happy you are here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here, and it's a rainy day here in Somerville, Massachusetts, and it's a pleasure to talk with you. It's brightening the day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You have just said that you are based in Massachusetts. This is how I got familiar with your work because of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and because of your cooperation with Otto Scharmer, who is best known as the author of the Theory U. You made it accessible in the visual way for plenty people around the world. And when I saw your visuals and I saw the Theory U with this beautiful aesthetic touch, I said, oh, this is how knowledge should be communicated. This is, such an enrichment. And actually, you have gone beyond. At one point, you've said, scribing is wonderful, nevertheless. Generative scribing, this is exactly what your heart beats for, and you have also written a book on it. Would you tell us, especially those people who cannot really, imagine anything under this term, what is meant by generative scribing?
Yes, so thank you for your kind words, firstly. I have worked with Otto Scharmer since about 2007 and worked with his ideas and his concepts since about 2000. So it's really been over 20 years that I've been thinking about the frameworks that he's put forward, and I've been incorporating those into my own visual practice. And Otto has a framework called levels of listening, and it goes along with another framework called the matrix of social evolution. And in both of those, there's a shift from level 1, which has to do more with an ego state or functioning as an I, to level 4, which is an ecosystem approach, which is functioning from the field, from a social field, and from what's around us and between us. And there are things in between in levels 2 and 3, and I'm making it very simple. But when I was scribing with Otto, people started asking me why my work was looking different, or how my approach was starting to change. And I think that what ended up happening was that those frameworks started weaving their way into my visual practice. So when I learned to scribe, it was with Matt and Gail Taylor back in the 1990s. And it was a more literal approach, but also using frameworks. So people would say something and you would draw it as a scribe. There would be a one-to-one representation of what it was, but then also we were working with models, a very rich modeling language. And that shifted my approach to be more structural. But in working with Otto, it started to be more generative. And what I mean by that, and what I mean by generative scribing, is that the scribing enfolds all of the other ways, all of the other approaches. So it enfolds a more literal approach, and it enfolds a structural approach, but it also enfolds an energetic approach. And that's what I mean by generative scribing. So it's not only an energetic approach where you're paying attention to the tone and the feel and the less visible aspects of a conversation, but you're also considering the structure and very literal words. So it's really all of those things. That was a long answer, sorry. But, it's not straightforward because some people think that generative scribing looks a certain way. And to me, that misses the point of it, because the point is that it's coming from a certain place, but it's not excluding anything else. So it's incorporating other methods and adding an element of energy, let's say, or of what comes between things. Yeah, it adds an element of what comes between, what's more easily identified.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Because, when I think of the theory U, and also, this different layers, I immediately picture your visuals, and I immediately see also, this first layers going to the past, and also identifying the past patterns, like seeing, so very, very basic, and then also sensing, so exactly what you are describing, going deeper also with all the possible senses, but also from the field. Yeah. And then there is this point of presencing. And when I listen to you, I have to immediately think of this really moment of presencing in terms of being here and now, and being conscious about it. So it goes beyond mindfulness, doesn't it?
Well, it includes mindfulness, and I appreciate that you brought up the presencing, because that really is what generative scribing is about. It's when you are able to sense into the emerging possibilities. And yeah, so it's not just reading the energy in the room, it's deeply being able to sense into what is wanting to come into the room through the drawing and through the people, and connecting with that emerging future and giving that some form. And you need to be a scribe needs to be very, very present in order to do that, and very still. And so there is an element of mindfulness in it, so that you can keep yourself open and with the situation.
Exactly. Exactly. Because again, when I think of the theory U, it's really about this open mind, open heart, and open will. So with the open will, this is exactly this presencing moment when you are really willing to listen so attentively that, as you have just said, you can touch this intangible and make it visible. Yeah. So that, of course, the next steps can crystallize. And of course, yeah, the next phase is crystallizing and then also prototyping. So really going into action. So the theory U is very, very generative itself. And what makes me really curious, is actually this moment of drawing and painting and being in this creative flow. Because actually I have just said at the very beginning that I met you because of your visuals and wonderful work in the context of explaining theories of by Otto Scharmer. Nevertheless, we had the chance to meet in person this summer in Bilbao in Spain, and this was the moment when I realized that all the people who are in your field are really facing this challenge that during this moment of sensing, presencing. First of all, it's not only about the level of concentration, but also this consciousness about their own filters. So just to dive deeper, I know that after my presentation at the very beginning of the conference, it was the opening presentation, I had a look at different visual recordings. And I was really overwhelmed because I saw, oh, wow, it's so clear to the speaker that certain messages are very, very transparent. Nevertheless, there were no two same visual recordings. So what is actually happening in this process of the flow, that you know that there is this different perception in different people?
That's an interesting question. And I don't know if there was an opportunity at that conference for the people who had scribed those different images to actually speak to their process and what it was they were picking up on, so that you could know side by side what the differences were. We could see them in the pictures, but I don't know if there was an opportunity to inquire. I just don't remember if there was or not, but always a filter. There's always a bias. Even if we say, visual practitioners say that we try to get out of our own way, there's still our lens. So I will always be, a 56-year-old, like a middle-aged white woman from the Northeast in the United States. And no matter what I do or where I travel in the world, that's me. That's part of my background, and that informs how I listen. So I will always hear topics around, like, women. Feminism was a big part of my life growing up in my family history, and I will always have a different bias in the room towards women and power, because of the sensitivity of, because of that awareness growing up, and looking out for that. And other people will have different biases. And I've thought about this a lot, and I've talked with other scribes about this a lot, especially in the context of systems scribing that I've developed with Jessica Reel, where perspective and bias is one element of a system to be conscious of. So when you're scribing, notice it, know where you're coming from, and then hold that awareness in order to see other perspectives and know that other people are coming from other places. So I don't think you can ever completely let it go, but you can use it as one filter of many filters. And especially considering the open heart, which you mentioned before, being willing to put yourself, or being willing and able to put yourself in the shoes of someone else from a different perspective with a different bias. So, when I hear the word bias, I also, for me, it's not a negative term. It's just our lens of what we see and what we're aware of and what we're not aware of.
Definitely, definitely. This is actually how our brains function. And yes, this is just the yes, level of consciousness, how much we are conscious about these processes. Definitely, yes. So when I listen to you, I immediately, have also this curiosity in me. How can actually our awareness shift when we see drawings, paintings, and this visual proof of what is happening in the lecture, in the group, in the yes, big social event? What is actually happening?
What I've witnessed is that it facilitates a shift from the mind to the heart to the will. So it helps people deepen their own experience in the room. So yesterday I was in a session, and it was a government related, US government related. And my assumption going in is that it would be very logical and very, ordered and very, very functional and very tactical. And I thought that I would scribe in a certain way to match that and to honor what was in the room, and also pay attention to the quality of heart, to open up the space of the heart. And I picked my colors to work with that. So my colors had some softer, warmer colors in them, which is a subtle way of creating something visual that could speak more to, softer elements inside of us. And my big surprise is that I was the one that was softened when I was in the room. I was the one whose heart was opened, because the stories that the people were telling about their work and their personal lives and what they'd been through in the military was really, really moving. And so maybe there's something to the scribe being conscious of the feedback loops in the room and the interconnectedness that I was speaking to before, where it's not only our drawings that have an effect in the room. So it's not only our drawings that shift people in some way, it's how we are also shifted by the room, and how we let ourselves change as a result of our listening. So if we go in thinking we have all the answers and we're just making something for people that will change them, that's kind of missing the point, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's something to being aware of the relational qualities in the room that then brings the drawing out in a different way. But generally I try to scribe so that if there's a lot of conceptual talk in the room, I pay more attention to my heart to try to help open that heart space in the room. If there's a lot of heart already in the room, but maybe there's not yet a lot of action, I try to open myself to, that open will. I check in with my own levels of fear or apprehension and try to hold the space for something else to deepen or to manifest. So it's like being aware of, for me, at least with my practice, the heart, mind, will, the head, heart, hands, spirit also in there, and just making room for all of those to come in.
Yeah. You have just mentioned that in this project for the government, people were sharing stories, and they were also sharing very, very moving stories. So, when I add additionally this aspect, that in many cases people are also diving into sharing stories, and they can be very, very sometimes traumatic, sometimes really sad, sometimes very, very moving, sometimes obviously also motivating others people. It adds this additional layer to your activity, because it's not only about this very attentive listening, not only about being conscious of bias and filters, and it costs the brain lots of energy, but also dealing with someone's emotions. And when you said that it's so much about working with the open heart, it exposes you. It also, just is the matter of vulnerability on your side. How do you protect yourself in this process?
I don't know. I think that the life I've had has led me to have a very strong heart. And especially now through COVID, where I've been alone for most of the time, there's something to being in a very heartful space that is very nourishing for me. So even if the stories were very moving and some were hard to hear, I was really like loving being in a space where people were sharing like that. I always will lean into something that's more intimate. And if there's a room full of people and one person wants to sit in a corner and have a conversation, I will be with that one person having a conversation. And so maybe it's just how I'm wired. Maybe it's just how I've developed, that I like being in spaces that are authentic and vulnerable. Of course, there are times where it's I need protection, and sometimes it feels flooded, like there's too much going on, too much feeling going on. And if that's the case, usually then I just keep drawing. I would disengage a little bit from people and focus more on what I'm doing with my hand to balance it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when I listen to you, it immediately just leads me to this comparison that it's so much about jobs like psychotherapist, maybe coach, life coach, all these jobs where people talk so much about just trying to protect themselves, also to let go a little bit, so that they are really also conscious about it's not my story, it's not my challenge. I can leave the space and I can live my own life. And when I listen to you, it's really this, this association that you really dive deeper, that you really want to support and enhance this making, not so much at, not only at the cognitive level, but especially above all at this emotional level, at the energetic level. So this is very, very moving, because this is actually art, additionally to the visual art.
Well, I'm really concerned about the human condition. I always have been. And I grew up in a divorced family structure, and I grew up not being sure of what I could expect emotionally in different situations. And so I think it's my own curiosity to learn about how do other people do it.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out, I feel like I'm very awkward in life, and I'm always socially anxious, and I'm very I don't understand life that well, and I'm very curious about it. So being open-hearted is just my way of trying to learn, how do other people do it? How are you getting through the day? It's not only in the context of trying to facilitate or help a situation, it's my own genuine,
Yeah.
My own genuine
Yeah.
interest in the human condition.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I listen to you again, there is, kind of this, how to call it, kind of the negative space between the storyteller and the story listener. Yeah. So when the people are listening, or when they are sharing stories with you and you are the story listener, there is this kind of, this space in between, that of course all these things that are not said, are not communicated, play also a very, very important role. And this is actually also something that is so important, so crucial for the process of drawing, painting, and being an artist. Yeah, that many people are so overwhelmed, like, oh wow, this is such a wonderful drawing, this is such an amazing painting, and everybody is talking about all this what is visible. Nevertheless, of course, there are also these negative spaces in the pictures, and they play a very, very important role. How do you come up with your artistic soul in the process of generative scribing?
Well, for some reason, the word silence comes to me, that it's as much about creating something that speaks as it is about creating something that preserves silence and some element of pause and mystery. And even though we're drawing through and from this unknown space, there's something to also honoring the unknown and letting that have presence. So some things come through and some things don't. And when I scribe, I hear things and I think, ooh, that's interesting, but somehow it doesn't make it into the picture. It's not really ready to be part of the picture yet. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's how the soul comes in more, is just letting the picture be some sort of representation of the spirit. So it's not only the mind and the heart and the will and what's been said and, you know, what we're making known through the picture. It's letting this element of spirit. Yeah, it's letting this element of spirit have some voice also, which might be a quiet voice, which might show up as empty room in the drawing.
This is also, something that also is our common experience and our common passion for art. Both of us, we have studied art history, and both of us, for whatever reason, have landed in the communication field, and also witness also, of course, in different jobs with different profile, what can emerge in the group and how it can enhance this meaning making. And when I think of generative scribing, I immediately have to think also of this intercultural aspect as well. Because as much as we speak different languages, as much we also use different visuals that are differently interpreted in various corners of the world. And it leads me to the question, of course, how can we make sure that these visuals are really, understood by a very, very diverse, also culturally diverse audience?
I don't know. I think about that question a lot too. There are scribes all over the world now, scribing in different languages, different contexts. I taught a workshop about a month ago for a group in Northwestern Australia, and I was online, and I asked them at the beginning of the session to draw a metaphor for how they were showing up in the session, in the program. And I've done this in many other workshops, and people will have their own individual piece of paper and draw an animal or a shape or something on it, just as a quick check-in. And this group immediately went to one piece of paper on a table, and they were all drawing into that from different places. And so there was no content. It was like no one was coming at it from the I approach. It immediately was like how it was immediately it completely changed the structure of what I had presented. And it was so beautiful. And I was in awe and in shock that this had just happened. And it was because it was a completely different culture.
Yeah.
And so they took what I had presented and did it in the way that was right for them. And it opened my mind up, and it opened up possibility for how to approach this initial sharing in the future. So in a way, it wasn't an explicit exchange of culture, but I presented something from my culture. The group responded in a way that was culturally authentic for them. And then it can create other possibilities in other cultures, depending on, how I might do that exercise again, I guess. But I don't know. That's just that was just something that came to mind. But maybe it's just this, staying open to learning and what are other people doing. I'm trying to think in metaphor to help it land a little bit better. I'm sitting here in, Boston, Massachusetts. It's pouring rain outside. It's not too cold. I could go out with one jacket, maybe. Winter's coming. There's a certain climate. There's a certain, certain element to or a certain way that the weather is in the air. But if I went to another part in the country, or I came where you were, or I went to Northwestern Australia, that scene outside would be completely different. And I don't know, maybe it's just remembering that where we are isn't the only place. I don't have a good answer for this.
Exactly. No, exactly. And also our perspective is just one of many.
Yeah, maybe it's just keeping that in mind, that we're one of many. Our place is one of many places. Our language is one of many languages. our view is one of many views.
And
And
our visual language is also one of many, many languages. And it's
yeah,
not the goal to make it universal, because then it would just lose the beauty.
yeah,
It would be the end of learning. Yeah.
yeah, I think I wrote about this in my book, that when I first came to scribing, I realized that the individual images side by side were like mosaics that I had seen in southern Italy, and
Mm-hmm.
this notion that every little square of colored glass has a place in a larger picture, and you can go up close and you can look at the piece of glass, or you can step back and you can see the full picture. And I like to think of each image that I draw and each image that I see other people drawing or that I know about as small pieces in a much larger picture of, this moment in this moment on our planet, and this moment with our species and other species.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I relate to your metaphor right now with the mosaics, I also immediately have to think of this phenomenon that actually, in order to be able to see this beauty, this shining golden particles, and the artist also added some black, really tiny, tiny pieces, so that they can break the light and it can be reflected. And that's why we've got this shiny moment. So, this is also something that immediately triggers this idea that in order to have this really, let's say, shiny future, we definitely need to involve also this yes, stories and tiny black pieces that are hurtful. That we cannot really live in moment of creating
Absolutely.
this ideal.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to have, it's the same way that you have a concentrated area on a picture of drawing, and then you have an area of spaciousness. There's an area of potential and there's an area of current reality, and the current reality might be dark or bright, and the future might be dark or bright. So yeah, I would never suggest forcing brightness on a situation. But I do wonder, yeah, so if we think of all the graphic recording, the graphic facilitation, all the images that are out there, I do wonder what would be the what would be the tone of the picture that we're collectively creating.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Very interesting. We can think of, having it at this meta level and seeing what it
Yeah.
means. Kelvy, we've been through a very, very challenging time. And this is the question I ask all my guests actually. What was helpful for you? What one single word was helpful and supportive for you in this turbulent time? And what was the story behind?
Yeah, so I would say that the word is holding,
Mm-hmm.
and what it speaks to is how I became more sensitive to how I was holding and supporting others in my immediate sphere, and how I was or wasn't being held. And then also how I was holding the community of visual practice in some way. I was how we were holding each other really through the pandemic. And I was alone the whole time. I was very alone, live alone, you know. Um, I didn't have a pet. I didn't get a pet. and I had a few friends that I was seeing during the pandemic. Of course, it's been shifting now, so
Yeah.
things are different. But during the harder part of the pandemic, I had to really learn how to hold myself differently, because I wasn't in the same social contexts where I could count on other people for support. And even though I was on Zoom all the time, how I held myself emotionally became a really big inquiry for me. How do I do it? Like, how do I keep myself well? Because it was really hard. I was depressed for a lot of it. But I started to, because of that inquiry of how do I hold myself well, I started to really look at what the components in my life were and which ones reinforced wellness and which ones reinforced less wellness or
Mm,
unwellness, and
mm,
and then tried to shift it. But it was interesting because I really had so much of my attention going to my own well-being to try to just stay above water, that I don't know how well I held other people.
mhm,
And I'm not sure who might have needed me that I wasn't there for because I was putting so much attention to keeping myself okay. But an element of holding is trust. And so I also trusted that when someone needed me, I would know,
mm,
and that when I needed somebody to hold me, I could reach out in a few directions and find someone.
mm.
So I think I learned a lot about how we can be with one another through things that are difficult. And yeah, so the word would be holding.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. This word of holding has got right now completely different meaning for me because, of course, we've been talking about holding space for such a long time. And right now, when I listen to you, it became much more tangible and much, much more emotional. So, from the bottom of my heart, I wish you and also people who listen to us that we always find these moments where we can hold each other and that we are conscious about it, that we are not alone in whatever situation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Joanna. It's with a lot of appreciation that we end the call, and it's also opened me up. Even talking about holding, I felt very well held by you through the call and this whole process. So
Thank
I
you.
hope that it's engaging for people to listen to. And thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kelvy. All the best for you.
You too.